Hey friends, Chad Group here. I'm one of the pastors at Restoration Park Church in Medway, and Pink asked me to make this short devotional video for you as a source of encouragement and blessing, and I pray that it will be that for you today. We are living in some very interesting times right now. This coronavirus pandemic has impacted each and every one of us in different kinds of ways. I know for me and my family, we are on day 11 of a self quarantine. The reason for that is our oldest son, he was in Spain this semester studying there. And we finally got him home, and they asked us to stay put for 14 days. Now, I am an extrovert by nature, and it's been a real challenge for me to stay home and not go see people. I want to go talk to people and see people. I don't care much for talking on the phone. I prefer the face to face communication. So it's taken some real discipline to do that. For some of you, there's anxieties or uncertainties about your job. I know my wife, as she's a hairstylist by trade, and so they closed all the hair salons down, and so she's not had a job right now. Been a real, source of struggle for her. Whatever it may be, this season, it brings with it a lot of challenges to us. And it can be easy to focus on the things that we don't have. It can be easy to focus on the negatives and the restrictions that's been placed upon us. But the season also is ripe with opportunity for us to grow in our faith. It's a chance for us to really focus on the life of Jesus Christ, who is the author and perfecter of our faith. Now, one of the ways to counter the idea of focusing on negative things with this pandemic is the word contentment. And I want to bring that to you today as for this devotional, the idea of contentment. Contentment is defined as this: it's a satisfaction with what one is or has, not wanting more or anything else. It's also defined as ease of mind. I think we all want a sense of peace during this season. And I want to define also discontent, because it's also just as important as defining contentment. Discontent is defined as dissatisfaction of one's circumstances. It's really easy to be discontent with our life right now during this season. But the Apostle Paul really speaks into this idea of being content. And I want to focus on three verses in Philippians. Now, I want you to understand that the Apostle Paul, when he wrote this letter to the church in Philippi, he was on house arrest, he was in prison. And this book, the book of Philippians, is a book of hope and love and joy. And he speaks into this idea of contentment to us. And so I want to read here verse 11 and 12 and then 13. Paul says this: I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I want you to, a key word there, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned, there's that word again, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Paul discusses this idea of contentment. He has had a bunch and he's had nothing. He's been at the top and he's been at the bottom. He says, I have learned to be content in all things. He's telling us this idea of contentment is something, it's a learned ability. It's something that we can learn and grow in. If we're going to be honest, contentment is not a very attractive word to us. We don't like the word contentment. It's accepting our place in life. It's accepting what we have. But Paul recognizes that when we are content, it definitely changes how we see everything that happens around us. It changes how we view our own circumstances. It changes how we view what we have or what we don't have. Now, Paul does say it's a learned ability. And how do we learn to be more content? Well, I'm glad you asked. I want to say a couple things about that. The first thing of it is that we need to become a people of prayer. Earlier on in chapter 4, Paul says, be anxious about nothing, but in everything, and prayer, supplication, and thanksgiving. This idea of prayer. We need to be a people of prayer. And prayer is when we turn our minds and we focus on Christ. And the more we focus on Christ, the more he increases in our lives, the more we decrease. And the more the things of this world kind of lose some hold in our life. They don't mean the same to us anymore. The second thing that Paul says as well on how you learn to be content is changing your mind. Paul says in Corinthians, take every thought captive and make it obedient unto Christ. He says there are things that come into your mind that are not godly. They're not pure thoughts. He says every thought that you have, you need to filter that through Christ. Focus it on Christ and be obedient in this. Now he ends the last verse with one of the most famous verses of all, which is verse 13. It says, this is how Paul can do this. This is how Paul can be content while he's on house arrest. And this is how we can be content no matter what our circumstances are during this pandemic. He says this in verse 13, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Paul says the only way that we're really going to find contentment is by focusing on Christ. It is in him. It is not our own efforts. It is only in Christ where we can find the strength to get through whatever situation that we are going through. So I want to say this, the way that we counter the negative thoughts, the despair, the discouragement is finding contentment. And we're only going to be content when we focus our minds, we focus our hearts on Jesus Christ. It's in prayer. It is changing our minds because it's only by his stripes. It is through him that we have the strength to do this. So I want to pray that you guys will find contentment in Christ because, again, he is all we need. And we are going to get through this because he himself is an overcomer. And it's he who is in us that is greater than he who is in this world. So no matter what it is you're going through, no matter how bleak your circumstances look, let us find peace. Let us find ease of mind. Let us find strength in Christ. God bless you guys.